All right, welcome everyone. I've got everyone unmuted right now, and we're going to start our call. Welcome to part 3 of Marketing to the LGBT Community. And today, Bob and Rich are going to take us from theory to practice, and we'll start discussing some more applications of also what you're going to do. I'm Pat Bailey, Director of Training here at Out and Equal, and Q is on the line with me as we go through the call. A couple of announcements real quick, things coming up. We're continuing our hurricane series. We've got a couple more of those coming up in March. You can check the web link for that. Our town call tomorrow is going to be creating a true rainbow in LGBT ERGs, and you can sign up for that by going to the town call page. We also have some more courses coming up in April, as well as our executive forum and our annual leadership celebration. All that information is up on the web. So you can check that out and get more involved with our programs online, but also in your regions and at our summit. We've done this a couple times, so we should be pretty good with the webinar features. But remember, once we get started, I will go ahead and mute your line and use the chat to ask any questions. Technical problems, raise your hand. Polling, actually don't have any polls in this one. We're going to discuss more on this one. And this will be recorded, and you will get a link for that. Today in part 3, we're going to take a look at some of the best practices for creating a marketing program in the workplace, and then also to talk some about how do we actually have these discussions when issues arise, so when it doesn't go the way as planned. And then I'm going to be asking you to be thinking about during the call, what is your action plan? What is it that you want to do next in terms of actually developing a plan, or what the plans are within the company, or how you're going to kind of use this course. And there'll be an opportunity at the end where you'll share that information. And then Bob and Rich will be able to ask questions and give you feedback. So a little one-on-one consulting at the end. So let's do our introductions right now. And let's get your name, what company you're from, and what do you think is the most important aspect of a marketing campaign? So let's start with you, Aaron. Go ahead.
Aaron Sharon. I work at an account management at Publicis Advertising in New York, working on Procter & Gamble brands. I think the most important aspect of a marketing campaign is to have a really sharp insight into the audience you're trying to reach. What is it that motivates them?
Sounds good. April? Go ahead and unmute if you can.
April stepped away. She'll be back in a moment.
Okay, no problem. We'll jump to Chris. How about you, Chris?
Is there more than one Chris on the line?
Nope, you're the only Chris.
Okay. So my perspective is I'm actually coming at this not from an Ernst & Young perspective, but from a Maryland Corporate Council perspective. It's an LGBT networking group. So I'm looking to reach out into different sectors within the LGBT community in the Baltimore and surrounding areas in Maryland. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And any perspectives on when you're doing a marketing campaign, what's the most important thing that you look at?
Knowing that I'm actually reaching the people that I intended to.
Good point. Nadeem, how about you?
Well, I'm hoping I can just, with this, figure out and help our marketing group, or even just our ERG, of what's maybe good language to use, what are good ways to communicate where it's to a broad audience, but you want to still be inclusive to the LGBT audience.
Sounds good. April, let's jump back to you and go ahead and name who you're with, and what do you think is the most important aspect of a marketing campaign?
So since I'm on the Out and Equal communications team, I think that it's important for me to know the best methods for just getting the word out about our mission and about our programming. And I'm hoping to learn how to expand that by joining the call.
All right, sounds good. Joe?
Hi, this is Joe Keenan with New Avenue Marketing. I think in terms of any campaign, it's really the overlap between the brand, what is it about the brand attributes, the brand DNA, and then the core aspects of whatever the target consumer is, and identifying that overlap and how best to drive that message at the right time.
Sounds good. Laura, how about you?
This is Laura Verduzco from Chevron, and in my case, I think the most important aspect is endorsement from management.
Good point. And Sandy, how about you?
I'd have to say final output, breaking through the clutter is very important, making sure people are paying attention to your message and that you're reaching the right people.
Okay. And now I'm going to kind of let Bob and Rich introduce themselves, but kind of taking from what everybody was saying and the discussion of things you've learned along the way, what are the best principles for a good marketing program? And Bob, why don't we start with you?
Well, thank you. It's Bob Wittick. One of the things that I liked, at least a couple of folks identified at the beginning, is knowing your audience and also understanding, what is going to resonate or work with them. And I think that for the LGBT population or for the market, we have to understand that in a lot of different ways. One thing is, if people, I don't know the sexual orientation of anybody on the, well, a couple of you I do, but I don't know most of the sexual orientation of any people that are here. One of the things we have to do is to get outside of our own skin and not just impute from our own experience that we know it resonates. We have to think of the population, the target, as something that we still need to explore, to investigate. There's lots of learnings about the audience, and there's lots of learnings about the segmentation within the LGBT space that we really should talk about as well when we have time today, because when we speak of it as a homogeneous way, I think we disserve the complexity and the nature of the LGBT population. So I think we can get into that a little more deeply, but I want to really make sure that we think of it as we would any population, really understanding the target very well and understanding what works and connects with them.
Great. And Rich, how about you?
Yep. This is Rich, and I would say it'd be accuracy, inclusion, and then impact. Whoever said breaking through the clutter is right on when it comes to reaching LGBT people and being recognized as being an LGBT inclusive company. With more and more companies going in that direction, we're advising corporates to really push the envelope when it comes to LGBT images and ideas for getting into the LGBT space. That's
great. Kind of what we want to do today, again, we've talked on a very high level the last two sessions, is we want to spend a little more time on doing some case study discussion. And Bob has brought forward a case study on American Airlines. And Bob and Rich are both going to kind of comment and talk about this as a way that a marketing program, how it got started, where it goes from, and that whole progress. So think about, again, as participants, where is my company in relation to this, or where is my work? What do I need to do next, and what are the things I need to consider? So, Bob, Rich, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Pat. The one thing I want to say is I'm very proud to take this on as an iconic story. American Airlines has been part of the LGBT experience for 20 years. I started working with the company in, imagine, December of 1993. It's actually pre-internet, so you can imagine it was the internet was beginning, and AOL and CompuServe, I think, were just off the ground. But in our lexicon, we really didn't have a chance to speak to the digital space or online space for the company, but we did have some very pioneering ideas about how American would communicate its gay welcome, its inclusiveness. And so I want to sort of state out those lessons, because to me, a marketing case, I think, that is really successful, uniquely successful, is a holistic one. It's not just the notion that we're going to bring to market a service or a product. It's also a reputational study. It's a sense of how we get language right, as one of our participants mentioned. It's a sense of how authentic we sound and how trusted. And I think trust, to me, as a marketer, trust is such a key word. Rich, when you said accurate and inclusive, there are issues here where companies have got to really get it, that when you speak with authentically, then you do build trust. And that's something I think every brand has to take into account. And it's not just with the LGBT space. It's with all consumers. In the digital space, in the digital conversations we have today, trust, reputation, authenticity are themes of everything we hear, good and bad, about almost every brand. So getting to the beginning, I'm going to start off with the I'm trying to, there it is, what diversity looks like, because American, I think, like other companies, does not take the LGBT space as a one-off. It's not a one-off. It's part of. And this is so critical today, is that when you grow loyalty among a increasingly diverse customer and employee base, you have to think of it in a more universal way. An LGBT identity is part and parcel of all of the complexity of the workforce and the customer base that they deal with. So developing a diversity strategy was connected immediately with their business objectives back in 1994. In 1994, one of the first tasks I had with the company was to help them craft a diversity council, which they did not have, and a lot of companies did not have diversity councils. They didn't have internal trusted managers and employees that spoke to the company in a confidential, or let's put it this way, in a business-like way. They created a business council, diversity council, and interesting, two things about it I want to mention because I think it is rather historic, and they still have the same council in place almost 20 years later. The council was first co-chaired by the lesbian ERG leader, a woman who is their lesbian ERG leader, and the head of their Christian employee group, which to me is very profound in a lot of ways. And what I mean by that is, obviously, we all get it that you could be both gay and a Christian. Early conversations I had with some businesses, they would use the expression "gays in God," and I said, every time you say that, you insult somebody. It suggests that gay people aren't churchgoers, or gay people don't have lives in faith. They're not raising their kids in churches, and they're doing all of those things. But one thing the Diversity Council was able to do is position the leadership as two very diverse points of view who got along. And not only that, that theme of uniting in terms of purpose was so helpful to the company because they had to weather controversy over the years like all companies seem to. But I'll get into controversy later, but at least from the beginning, the diversity approach they took was a very good one. It's universalized and it was holistic. And so I find that very important because if your campaign is one-off, it's a little bit more challenging because you still have all the other business units that have to address it. The results, I think, over 20 years, enhance understanding of diverse employees and customers. They have a conversation that's ongoing. It comes out every day in everything that they say and do. They also align their strategies with their market business goals, which I think is so key. So when they have this conversation about a marketing campaign, an ad campaign, about images, use of language, it's holistic. It can talk about people with disabilities, people who are Latino, people who are LGBT, and think about how they look and see through their lens. But it required getting rid of some silos, because when you work across business functions, you have a different way of thinking. And I think that's something that's hard for large enterprises to do. But I think it's something they should attempt to do because all of us know this, in whatever business you're in, is that if all of the businesses that are supported by the corporation are not aligned in terms of language, purpose, business objectives, diversity strategies, it's harder to do. It's just harder. And mistakes get made, people's feathers get ruffled, budgets get trashed. You know, anybody with a large enterprise knows that. Anyway, throughout this LGBT outreach, these are the things that American chose to do. Almost all of these things that I'm pointing to on this slide speak to the fact that when they did them, they were not commonplace then. When they did them, they were not commonplace. A majority of companies, especially Fortune 500 companies, did not do these things. They didn't have employee groups. They didn't have microsites. They didn't have benefits across the board. They didn't provide for their customer like Admiral Club's memberships. They didn't establish marketing teams, and they didn't have a supplier diversity arrangement. And so across the way, you can see that when you decide to be an early pioneer, there was lots of things they did that a lot of the companies that I think you work with today, and many of you are working inside, are already doing these things. But to me, these were paths that spoke to one conclusion. Doing all these things were your way of saying, we get it. We get it. Is that LGBT people have to feel that when they are working here or they're flying with us, that we understand that they are part of our customer base and they're part of our loyal workforce. If you did most or all of these things, you were saying we walk the walk. We don't just talk the talk. Because to me, starting out with the walk is the essential platform or blueprint to actually being in the campaign. It just makes your efforts so much more successful. They're not imperative or essential, but as a success factor, they clearly rank up there. So what does the marketplace look like? It's interesting. American, despite the fact that they began the policies and the practices almost 20 years ago, they hadn't done a lot of campaigns or marketing strategies. In fact, Rich, with GLAAD, they've been working with GLAAD over the years for a number of years, but it was through their sponsorships at that time that they were uniquely reaching their audience. They would go to the GLAAD Media Awards as the airline, official airline, and place their ads in a GLAAD program or an HRC dinner or a Lambda legal program. And so therefore they were out in the market mostly talking directly to probably the influentials, to the people who were attending the benefits and sponsorships. A lot of the companies that are in the universe that we all work in do that work today. They do partnerships and sponsorships. I think that's a necessary base, because I think what it speaks to is supporting causes that are important to the community. And we all know that because we do it in the Latino space and African American. We do it with other cultures and other audiences. But gay people 20 years ago, most of these organizations weren't getting a great deal of funding and sponsorship. And trust me, and Rich can imagine too, I don't know if you remember 20 years ago, the corporate underwriting of the GLAAD Media Awards was not what it is today. It was not as robust and as deep in terms of connections. So doing it was a very important thing, but it was rarer.
Yeah, American did invest not only by buying program ads, but invested enough money to get logos on step and repeat banners so that they were reaching LGBT people beyond the room. They were reaching anyone who was reading the LGBT magazines, and the magazines that were running photos from the GLAAD Awards all had American Airlines logos behind the celebrities. So that's kind of a tier that we reserve for the biggest partners.
They do, and also the thing for all of us is we love the halo. The GLAAD halo matters. What GLAAD is saying to the audience is that we want to get it truthfully, respectfully, and accurately to the audience. So we know that also when you partner with a GLAAD, for example, you have to get it right, because of course you can't put out a message that is going to be thought to be wrong, hypocritical, or stereotyping. A lot of things that we had to concern ourselves with along the way is making sure the message and the images didn't stereotype the storytelling that we wanted to do. But also companies, even American and others, the fundamental way we have to show LGBT imagery was through couples. Couples were the primary way that it was, and it's always been traditionally, except for slightly changing. There are some other ways of thinking about it, but the couples that we've been able to do, if you can see on these examples, largely these were both print, but there were digital executions for all of these. But in the advertising, the things that I was particularly proud of that 4 years ago when American took their out-of-home advertising and took it on the streets of New York, and took a same-sex couple image in a story to the streets of New York. Granted, New York is a great spot to do that. You don't worry about your audiences in New York. There may not be other markets where you feel as comfortable, but it's a place where you don't have any issues telling your story. And you also know that it's going to connect with non-gay people because they'll get it. And it's also sort of a wake-up call because straight people and allies are out there not seeing gay imagery on the streets of New York, but they should. And then, obviously, AA.com Rainbow, when that was launched 7 years ago, the gay microsite in the travel space, they're ubiquitous now. But I want to mention something. The AA.com Rainbow today, and rainbow to me is a little bit tired expression. It's a little cliched, but it's a tried and tested URL that they've had for quite a while, so at least it's branded with them today. And they also created their marketing team as a rainbow team. That was the idea, 20 years ago. So we've maintained those impressions even as the American Airlines brand itself is undergoing a transition with the merger this year. But if you go to the AA.com Rainbow page now, there's new things there that we're very excited about. For example, you can download Backgrounder on American Airlines and its LGBT community engagement, not only in English, but in Spanish and Portuguese. they're doing a great deal more work, especially in Latin America. Latin America is widely open, and American has deep penetration there. So we're doing much more in terms of translating news releases and knowledge into Spanish and Portuguese to reach the Latin and Central American audiences as well. In fact, I would say the entire Western Hemisphere is very important to American. They've already created a large LGBT space in terms of their campaigns. And so they have done these digital ads and print ads. The one of the, which I particularly like, is when you see the little lights change, have you buckled your seatbelt, or you put out, if you have a cigarette, which nobody does anymore on a plane, you have to have it out. And the last signal would be either a rainbow or an equal sign at the end, just saying you're flying on somebody who gets it. You know, they stand for equality, which is a very slight, small thing to say, but very meaningful to many in the community. And the other thing it was important to do at one point is not only talk about their policies and practices, but speak to the services or products that people want. Gay people are like everybody when you're online and not in the air. People love Wi-Fi, and so when they started innovating several years ago, putting Wi-Fi in many flights, we wanted to point out that gay people particularly love to have that connection. They love their email. They love to go up and update Facebook when they're flying over, the Grand Canyon or over a Pride Festival, and they get a chance to connect and talk to their partner live and on space where they can do that. So those are things that spoke to not just the idea that they're talking to gay people, but they're also pointing to products and services that matter to them. The Facebook presence has always mattered. It's not as robust as it might be yet, but it's approaching 17,000. All of these people are also invited into their Advantage program so that they can be subject to promotions directly. And also it's one of the few rewards programs that allows the gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender person to say that they specifically want to hear options, promotions, specials that are targeted to LGBT people. Kimpton's been doing that online on their space. They've been doing a great job with it. And other rewards programs, I think, are beginning to go there, because then you can have a specialized conversation that is targeted directly to LGBT people, something that really does matter to any of the companies that are trying to create brand awareness and loyalty. So in all those ways, I think they're doing some interesting work. The other thing you've done on the Rainbow page, which I'm very pleased, they've linked to www.aa.com/equality. It's on their main site. And equality is a page that talks about their policies and practices. So it talks about their HRC standing, which, in the ranking of Fortune 500 companies does matter. Companies that are getting that are getting labeled by HRC the best places to work, something that everybody that aspires to be a trusted brand would like to have seen on their website or in their marketing materials. So that is something that has been very important. One thing.
Quick item
go ahead. I'm sorry, Rich.
Oh, no worries. On the American Facebook page, on the Rainbow Facebook page, I feel like more and more companies are starting Facebook groups for their LGBT employee resource group, in this case Rainbow, and it seems like that has quickly evolved from an internal way to talk about what's happening that's LGBT inclusive in the company to really targeting LGBT consumers. American's a great example. Yahoo as well as NBCU all have evolved from a network, a place on Facebook for their LGBT employees to connect, to now their LGBT employee groups connecting with LGBT consumers. American, I believe, even went so far as to, I think I joined the group through a Facebook ad, so they're putting ad dollars behind getting LGBT consumers to their LGBT employee group on Facebook.
That is exactly right. We're discovering that Facebook advertising is a very connected way to do it. Gay people, we've seen in research, have been disproportionately favoring sign-ups on Facebook, of course, and also quickly identify online, so it's easier to find them. And it's a bigger universe than any LGBT media site at the moment. It's much bigger, of course, so it gives you a global platform. The other thing that is very good about it, and Rich, when you had Spirit Day, it gave American on its microsite and on Facebook a chance to make it go purple. And then also we discovered, without entirely coordinating it, that LGBT and their Gleam, their employee group coordination, they showed up and took images of themselves in purple in Europe and in Latin America, and we were able to post the images all over. So it was very exciting to see the allies, especially the allies who wanted to stand up and wear purple and have their picture taken, let us post them virally. And it gave a great sense of camaraderie among the workforce across all the time zones. It's quite amazing. We had great turnout too in Mexico, in Britain, you name it. It was really lovely to see how many did that, Rich. Now, the other thing I want to mention that really has been important to companies like American is to talk internally. Some companies are a little reticent how much they think they should do it, doing the It Gets Better video campaigns. They were the first airline to do that. They've been putting out some very smart interviews with employees. They have a terrific airline pilot who is a PFLAG leader in Dallas who has done interviews with their internal newsletters. The more you can do that, all of us know this, is that if you have a workforce that is engaged in understanding what it is we're trying to say, when they see the images in the campaigns, they see the work you're doing in the public, it becomes more authentic to them. It becomes real, it becomes meaningful, and it gives them confidence. It doesn't sound like you're taking a risk. It's really an education process, and giving them that chance to connect over it is so valuable. You know, at the beginning, I have to say 20 years ago, that wasn't an easy thing to begin. And there was great trepidation about even the blowback you would have internally. But it is 2013, and these kinds of things should be a simple matter. And most of the companies, employers that we're talking with here today, I think have already gone down this road a good ways. But to me, I think they're part of a marketing strategy, because if you do them, you get buy-in in such a robust way. Like those images that we saw on Facebook where people say, I want to be aligned. I want to say that story. And then the giving back in the community, again, these are the ways that we try to figure out how to take these sponsorships and promotions and do them. One of the things that's been hard to me is that, you know, they have a number of celebrity relationships. You always like, at the GLAAD stage is a perfect place to say it too. But the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber, the Matthew Shepard Foundation, of course, the work with Cyndi Lauper over the years, John Amici. John Amici, in fact, the NBA player, good guy from Britain. He is also the very first openly gay man we gave an entire interview to in the side of their in-flight magazine. So that was given an opportunity to tell that story and talk about his causes to all American Airlines customers. Something I think that we should always find a way to do is to give voice to those causes in the channels that we have to go to market. The other thing American has often done too is put their Pride Day or Coming Out Day, either one, put a rainbow flag in the main hall of their headquarters. In fact, GLAAD, Rich, I'm not sure you know it, but they have these big banners still. You can see some hanging there. They have some GLAAD recognition hanging on banners in the middle of their headquarters right there.
I did not know that.
It's very powerful to see the GLAAD brand, the name, right in the middle of their headquarters where the CEO and everybody else walks through in the morning. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing I think that we all feel, you know, we can always do better. And these are things that you can do even if you're in Dallas, Texas. So walking the walk is... I'm sorry?
If you look at those photos, you'll see George Carancho and Betty Young from American Airlines. I spotted them right away. And I think that American has done a great job of positioning some of their out executives, like George and Betty as well, to the community and building their own profiles. So now we associate American not only as a brand, but we associate the people working there who are heading up their LGBT marketing.
I think if you have that opportunity as a company, that's true, Rich, and you're right. They are actually ambassadors, effectively, and the face of the company. One thing is interesting, and Pat, you remember this 3 years ago in L.A., American has probably, I think he's the third or fourth highest senior executive in the company, is an openly gay man at American. He did a keynote address at Out and Equal in Los Angeles about 3-4 years ago. And to me, there's nothing that really excites certainly the workforce, but also serves as that ambassador relationship when you have 3,000 professionals hear from a very senior executive. A lot of straight allies speak at Out Equal, of course, but to see a very senior business executive, especially at some place like an airline where you don't necessarily expect to see an openly gay executive, is a very sort of intoxicating to a lot of people. It's very exciting.
Right, and I think a lot of times, I mean, just that energy that builds within the employees, that this is now not only within the company do we know this person's, very supportive and out and visible, but now the rest of our competitors, the rest of our, business colleagues all know that. And I think that really helps charge them up to be motivated to be in the company.
Yeah, it's a big motivator for all companies. And again, the drum roll I'm making here is, isn't American Airlines great? Which one? They are. And I'm very proud of their track record because I think they've moved the needle on so many ways. But I also want to say that these are all ways of thinking about innovation. They're ways of thinking about where and how you communicate. Marketing is not just an ad, of course. All of us know this. It's speaking to audiences in a lot of different ways. And so reaching audience gives you a lot of paths by which you can have a true voice. And ads are one path because they actually talk directly to customers in places where they expect them. But it's where you reach people where they're not expected always. And these are a little old school, some of these, because digitally you can do a lot more than the things that I'm demonstrating. But Americans' earned media, for example, in LGBT space is quite robust. They are also, just because virtue of their appearance and participation in programs and speaking out on programs, has earned them the right to be in the pages of gay publications on a lot of issues. And right now with the merger, everybody wants to know when they have American and U.S. Airways join forces, is that good for us? So my answer to that is I really hope so. I really know that they have invested too much DNA, into getting it right for them to retreat on any of these things, and their policies are in very, very good shape. And their workforce is very connected to those policies, including all of the in and out of aircraft, because the pilots and others are see it as a very important measure of how the company is inclusive.
I know this is Pat again. We've seen a lot of that through the mergers of companies over the last 3 years with the economic drawdown.
Right.
That as companies merge, those cultures blend. But
right.
in the long term, after X amount of time, it seems that value emerges again, that's still an integral part of who they are.
It is. It's part of their identity. And here's the business results, because all of us know one thing. ROI, for example, is just critical. It's on the path of how do we know that we're going to make this profitable. So we look at all the various ways you could measure it. The active employee engagement, participation by these diverse leaders, inclusive marketing, so that all of the marketing you're doing is reflective of your diverse customers, including same-sex couples, as you do other perspectives. For example, 3 years ago when they were in the market with television ads, I was in a room with a lot of their marketing strategists, and we were having this conversation about 3 different ads. And the question was casting them, because we were trying to identify ways that we could go out of the box in terms of thinking who would play different roles. They had a senior boss, a manager, and it turned into a black woman played that role, which was perfectly on target, but not necessarily something all of us are familiar seeing all the time, unless you watch, I think, Law and Order, which always has a black judge, which I think is great, and a woman behind in the ropes. But interestingly, when they started to cast a basketball player, professional basketball player, instead of getting a tall African-American man, they found a Eastern European man, because they were going to make him kind of clumsy and kind of a funny storyline that worked very well. But when you want to break out a stereotype, you find a different idea and catch attention in a new way. And I think that's what we were looking for, is that with everything you're thinking about is how can you make that world look more like the real world, the world that we live in, and not just use a cliche or a stereotype. And one thing that I really do want to emphasize is that in the many years I worked with American, for example, I don't find any program or strategy that they have done that has not, in some measure, involved corp comm, legal, HR, diversity strategies, marketing, sales, and then their third-party agencies. We end up thinking across boundaries because you have to. As you do it, you begin to realize is that all of these issues come together some way to speak to this audience in a holistic way. And what you do is you find leadership in all of those areas. I want to mention one thing that I'm very proud of too, because strangely, they have gotten one of the most diverse legal teams around in corporate America. They have, I think now, 4 or 5 senior lawyers, attorneys who are openly LGBT, and they have been very active, engaged in the community in terms of other issues of public policy. They've always had a member on the Lambda Legal Board and always been very active supporting the work of groups like Lambda Legal, finding that that is a very important thing for them to do because it creates a diverse relationship with corporate and other attorneys across all businesses. And any business can use that intelligence, that knowledge. And I find that has been such a strong characteristic of how they work and how they recruit that, for example, an African American lesbian mother, and there is a good friend of mine on their legal team, has made such a difference in terms of leadership at the organization. And she has felt so connected to the company's mission. All of us know one thing: recruitment and retention of stars and top talent. All of these programs in terms of going to market also speak to that. So it's not just the going to market, it's also inviting talent and recruitment, because they see there's not only a place for me, but a place for me to reach the highest capabilities that I know how. I find that extremely encouraging because I look across their bench in the last 20 years, how much it's changed in terms of that engagement, involvement, and inspiration given by LGBT and other diverse leaders. It's just changed, and all for the better. So in terms of business, it really is there. So the diverse segment marketing is thinking in these ways. To me, this is what going to market is about. It's the products and the channels. Do the products appeal, and how? You know, an airline seat is the same to everybody. They're all awful, right? But there's nonetheless, there's some things, or bells or whistles that people do want. They want some technology sometimes. They want online connections. They may want some diverse entertainment options, which are better. Those things have to come into play. Are they using diverse suppliers that reflect them? Do they do the corporate citizenship as your checklist? Do you support those causes that you know matter? Do the diverse customers see their messages in the media that they actually use? And for gay people, that's a very robust mix of channels now. Are those messages in the expressions that we use relevant and appealing? That's very key, and that's something we need to talk a little bit more about. And HR. Does our workforce look like them? And so these are the issues that I think have helped Americans wrap their heads around it and think about market strategies that do all of these things at a minimum, and also get some creativity behind them so that at least the stories they tell reach people in all these different ways, so they get a better story. They're challenged like a lot of companies, older companies in this economy. It's been a hard slog for them ever since 9/11, since the airlines really took a bath then. And then in the last few years it's been hard, but it's been hard on a lot of companies. So doing this has been a good investment for them because they have felt that this has given them a track record, and it gives them authenticity going to market that really has made a difference in the kinds of outcomes they have. I have to tell you, the one thing I know over and over again, no matter how things change there, and I've actually worked with them through I think 5 CEOs now, this is a commitment or investment that they've been so proud to continue, and it's one that they continue to find has reaped really both the tangible and intangible benefits in terms of their branding, their profitability, the loyalty factor, which all of us know is so critical, and also relevance in the marketplace today. The market has changed, and companies that get it are figuring out how to walk these ways through all diverse markets and not think of any group, particularly gay people, as a one-off. Anyway, I want to leave it there for now. I think we can talk about some other examples, and then we can talk about Q&A that I think we want to get into as well.
Definitely. And Rich, any other thoughts or perspectives you kind of wanted to add in there about what you're seeing from GLAAD in terms of beyond just American Airlines, but just you talked some of that about the first session, but it might be a good point to kind of review some of that.
Yeah, sure. I think that from the first session we kind of spoke about the increase in the types of companies who are either marketing to the LGBT community or really demonstrating their support for the LGBT community, and I think that could really be seen just in the past 24 hours with the filing of the marriage equality amicus brief for the Supreme Court. Companies like AT&T and Facebook and other brands that you haven't heard from on the marriage equality front were able to come forward and sign on to that. I think the other point from session 1, which I'd like to just remind everyone before we break out into kind of a Q&A, is the idea of the backlash that companies are used to receive when they went forward on the LGBT initiatives. But kind of a reminder, and kind of the best reminder that we've seen is really JCPenney, where several years ago they pulled advertising from the ABC sitcom that Ellen starred in, and last year they were very proud to announce Ellen as their national spokesperson. And even though there were calls from kind of a fringe group, a project of the American Family Association, the support that they saw really outnumbered any of the negative feedback that they were receiving. And as a result, the 1 Million Moms, the American Family Association project, dropped that campaign. So it seems like the field is open for corporates to really step up and make a strong case for reaching out to LGBT people and including us in marketing both internally and externally.
Well, it's also a good point about being able to evolve, that even if you're in a company that at one point was in that spot, it moves forward. Joe had a question, back to that kind of ROI discussion you were talking about, Bob, in terms of like the long-term effect with American on the general market. You know, how do we kind of measure that impact, or what happens to business? You know, is there a measure of the market segment that American gets, or any company gets, as a result of these advertising? How do you sell it to the numbers?
Yeah, that's an interesting. How do they competitively know? Joe, actually, your question says the general market. You mean the market outside of the airline industry? I'm guessing. Well, let me answer a couple different ways. First of all, I think what American did, and what other companies, they're not alone. There's some other really great pioneers and some really good leadership in terms of market engagement. And I think all of those, here's my take generally, I think those business leaders have changed America. I live here and work in Washington, D.C. I was on Capitol Hill in the U.S. Senate for 10 years as a press secretary for a senator. And in that world, which I loved, and it was an interesting space to be in, even at the time I was there, it did not move very quickly. Today, it's moving sideways as far as I can tell. It's so glacial. Change comes so slowly in politics now. I think the business leaders of America have changed everything in many, many ways. And I mean that in terms of entertainment media, news media, cause-related work that all the nonprofits have been doing for a long time. But when companies that are thought to be conservative, conservative institutions, they are conservative. They are primarily led by mostly, I would say, Republican business leaders. They also are very pragmatic. They see opportunity and they seize it. They also see fairness and they seize it. They see their workforces and they support them. So they are change agents. So, Joe, when you said general meaning, you mean the straight market, I think it has changed with the so-called, or I call it the mainstream market, because even if we're gay, we're part of that market as well. You know, most of the advertising and market impressions we get as individuals and households, everybody else gets those too. But I think what's interesting is that it's emboldened the JCPenney's and others to think, we've got to stop thinking monochromatically. We've got to really start thinking about the way people actually think and look. I'll tell you one specific way that gay people and gay advertising has changed the mainstream market. Gay people sort of object to the idea that we are idealized. For example, women don't always look, gay women look like a lot of different women in America, but they don't look like the cigarette models. They don't all look like they are women of a certain age in their 20s who look like they are all about to hook up each other. There are also women of all backgrounds, of all dimensions, all ages. And even wedding ads, I've noticed lately, have taken on this look that they don't all have to be in their 20s, because women who are marrying today, certainly gay women, tend to be older women who probably many times have had children. And they may be 30s, 40s, or 50s or older. And so therefore, I think we're pushing the edge on what it means to show true images of what people actually look like. JCPenney used, as we know, good friends of ours who were in Dallas in their ad, and created a Father's Day image that was very, very powerful. Also, others, was it, I want to say J. Crew that did the catalog models, and they used gay people and they used older people. A lot of people are hungry for that. They're hungry to show people who are real, and not to stylize them or pull them out of a model's palette and say everybody looks like this. Gay people and imagery that we've used too, Rich, I think it's safe to say, are far more multicultural. Gay couples in ads tend to be more often not the same race. And I think that gives permission to other marketers to think outside the box too, and you can create family models and others where children and parents can be different races. America looks more like that. The census tells us that. The multicultural household's a reality. Latino, African American, people of color are part of so many different families. We're not all white. That anecdote, maybe I used it before, Pat, I'm not sure, but in the 50s when black people didn't see themselves on TV, they screamed up and down because they were so happy to see a black face. Gay people's faces are going to show up on things now, and I think that's going to give marketers a lot more creativity.
Yep, and it's not
definitely, and I know you sent out. Hey, Rich.
I was just going to say that it's also the faces of children of gay people.
Yes.
It's also, more than holding hands, but gay people embracing, showing affection.
That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. It's also something that's new in a way for companies to really break new ground. Over the past week, we saw the Kindle release an ad where a gentleman was talking to a female at a vacation spot. She said, let me get my husband. What was the exact line, Rob? And he said, let me get mine too.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was, and my husband too. And then when you looked at him, you don't know which was which was married to the other.
Yep.
They're
and
just two attractive men.
It was kind of the first time in a mainstream setting that we saw a gay couple refer to each other as husbands, which we actually worked with the AP on the same this past week as well to kind of formalize that into their style books.
That's true. That was interesting synchronicity that those two conversations were going on at the same time about how we call each other. But your point about, I want to talk about that for a moment about affection, because 20 years ago, in America and in other places where I was working with people, they're talking about imagery, there's a great anxiety about showing affection or intimacy. The same images that you all would, that any of us would depict a straight couple, there was exceptionalized point of view about gay couples. We couldn't even do the same things you would do with other couples. God forbid they would kiss, but actually touching and holding were harder to achieve, and they would have to be more brotherly affection, like a hand on a shoulder, and not holding hands. So then again, 20 years ago, a gay couple holding hands in public had to choose where they could do that. Today, I think you still have to think about where you're doing it, but I don't think it's as ubiquitously dangerous as it was at the beginning of this journey. I think it was much harder then.
Definitely. So we kind of talked about the ideal ways to do this. Let's kind of have a little discussion about what happens when the marketing plan doesn't go as planned, and how do you deal with that public response kind of thing. There's some very infamous ones, both good and bad, and kind of how you deal with that.
One thing, Pat, I would say, I want to posit two generalizations that I know from experience. Companies still think about blowback. They still think about conflict. They still think about criticism, about whatever, because they're uber sensitive about all the blowback they're going to hear about anything. So they wonder about this, is what's going to happen. Now, my experience, and I think all our experience, Rich has said, that the kind of objections or concerns or anxiety that some people have when they see an expression, a gay imagery or campaign, it's usually garden variety. It might be a handful of comments or objections or criticisms or whatever that happens to be. But no campaigns emerge unless an organization, a third party. In the JCPenney case, you pointed it out, Rich, there was a group called the 1 Million Moms, which are neither 1 million or moms, I don't think. They were a send button down in Tupelo, Mississippi. And their objection was that they wanted to make a public spectacle of JCPenney. They wanted to blow back hard and say 1 million moms will object. Well, the first thing they failed to do was assemble 1 million of anything. 1 million send buttons they didn't assemble. But the other thing it did through GLAAD and other activists or advocates, they created this. In fact, I would say that today, Rich, if GLAAD didn't exist, this capability exists throughout our community through bloggers and others. They began to massage JCPenney with support, the kind of support you probably couldn't buy. I don't know how that all translated. I'd say this, JCPenney, no matter what, probably had a little heartburn over the whole thing because the story was about the conflict and not the story about what they were selling. So that's an issue. If your story is about conflict, then it's not necessarily helping your bottom line. It's not necessarily, it may not be harming it, but it may not be helping it. But there was a flash mob organized on Facebook that showed up at JCPenney's store in New York City. There was tremendous amount of MoveOn and other petitions in support of JCPenney. So they got tremendous, I think they got 10 times, maybe 50 times the support publicly that they wouldn't have had otherwise. The question for JCPenney or anybody else is, was that helpful? My part as the LGBT community says it educated people because I think it told them that people really do like the fact that marketers take risks. But the company also has to wrap their head around that risk and that noise to try to still stay true to their brand. They can't walk away from that. They have to still embrace their philosophy of inclusion and equality, of including diverse spokespersons and models. And if they back away or seem to back away, I think they lose everywhere because it says they have no spine. They have no principle. So JCPenney, I think, on balance, benefited tremendously from it. But again, it was almost beyond their management. They couldn't control that public conversation. And at the end of the day, I think they got far more advantage out of it than disadvantage.
They also
in that first 24 hours.
Yep. Rich, I'm sorry.
No worries. They also started their LGBT inclusion in kind of a very safe way. Picking Ellen as a national spokesperson, I think, was something that moms across America would applaud. So, they didn't go out with the ad with two dads first. They started with Ellen to kind of test the waters. And then I imagine if Ellen was that big of a PR nightmare for their company, they wouldn't have gone forward with having two moms and then two dads in their catalog.
You're exactly right. And the other issue here is that Ellen, for her value to them, is a universalized, admired figure. They weren't even trying at that moment. They were subtly saying it, but they weren't screaming, "We love the gays." What they were saying is, "We love Ellen," and Ellen, is popular with our core customers. And our core customers actually are, women and mothers. And on the side advantage is that virally they connect with gay people who would be thrilled that Ellen is speaking up for a brand.
Well, and Rich, one question for you from GLAAD's experience on this. You put out a campaign, you see this buzz start to happen. What's the first three things they should do besides call you guys to kind of mitigate these areas?
Well, I think what they had already done was really have a strong message about why this connects with their brand. JCPenney stood for fairness was one of the sound bites from their CEOs. I think they also did a good job of engaging, like Bob said, the LGBT blogosphere, which is incredibly powerful and excellent at mobilizing LGBT communities and allies into taking action and standing behind. And JCPenney also, last year, they went beyond just this one ad to really show that they were authentic to the community. They first had the Ellen ad, they then had the mom's ad and the dad's ad, and they then, kind of after all the controversy, which I would argue that they overcame, they took out a float in the New York City Pride Parade. It was a really large, large float up towards the front of the parade with the two dads who were in their campaign and all of their LGBT employees, and it was hundreds of people marching with JCPenney. They had a huge presence to show that they weren't going anywhere at the end of the day.
That is so key, though, too, because if they go quiet right afterwards, then the consideration many in the public will make out of it is that they've been cowed. They've been deterred. And JCPenney wants to say, we stand for who we are. Our brand is our brand. The other thing, Rich, they were trying to thread a needle here, which we all know. JCPenney was my mother's brand. My mother would buy, we had 7 kids. JCPenney is a, in my day, probably is more like a Costco or a Target, and it was affordable for families that had to, put on clothes and shoes on a lot of kids. And JCPenney has to be relevant today. And so the price point does matter, and they still can't lose sight of the fact that these are households that are probably not going to be designer brands. They're going to be general market. But they also wanted to say that we get it, that your families look different. So they wanted to be true to their core household economics, but they wanted to say, we're a little cooler than you thought. And we want to reintroduce our brand to an audience that says we know that the audience has changed.
And do I assume, Rich, that contingency kind of planning was in place before the ad campaign came out?
I know that the messaging part was.
I'm sure the messaging was, yeah.
Brand.
Right.
The rest of it, I think that I think it happened after they saw kind of that the public was in their favor for the Ellen campaign. We had conversations with them during that where they also let us know that the calls that were going into their customer service center in Texas, the calls for Ellen were really the numbers were much more than the calls against Ellen.
Yes.
They were flooded with calls in favor of Ellen and telling them to stand behind this decision.
Excellent. Let me kind of jump to another topic and discussions here. One of the things we talk about is obviously things like ROI and how do you take the data forward and how do you have these discussions with your management as you're trying to do these programs. And a lot of times, Bob, I know you talked about demographics and how many LGBT,
right.
How do
dance
we,
on the head of a pin, right?
Yeah, how do we have this discussion about studies and what should you be looking at a study if you're going to move forward and use it for your justification?
Well, the clear thing I think is this. There's a variety of knowledge out there. There are a lot of metrics out there. Just understand what the metrics purport to explain. I feel very important with the marketers that I work with is to give them a range of information and then to understand the methods, how the data was captured. Because there is a lot of self-selected sampling. In other words, it can also skew a bit. I'm always anxious when there's exceptionalism put out there that gay people are all wealthier. Sure, there are wealthy gay people. There are plenty of wealthy gay people. There are a lot of struggling gay people, though, too, in this or any economy. Young people who are trying to make it, couples that are trying to have kids. The penalties and discrimination economically that gay couples and households feel is in law. It's not just in the economy, but it's in law. So we understand that. So one thing as marketers, we take ownership, responsibilities to not understand that there are myths about the consumer and households that we need to deal with that we don't want to propagate. We don't want to address issues that others might use to suggest that we are privileged, overprivileged. And I think as marketers, we want to connect in an authentic way that understands how to use data responsibly. And so that's why also I cite the census often, because the household data there is so good. The Williams Institute's given us a good deal of knowledge about economic behaviors as well. And throughout is just the knowledge that we have to speak to a variety of different data sources and use them credibly. And I spoke earlier about the diverse communities. We sometimes speak of the LGBT community, and that's a political expression because we are a organization. I mean, we're a group of groups. Gay people come from all backgrounds, all races, all households, economic conditions. And in knowing that, we are part of all communities. And so when I talk to you about our communities, I try to think of what we have in common, but then also not leave out the fact that we look like America. we're old and young and disabled and not disabled. We have all skin color and races and ethnicities, and so I think we all feel a responsibility as marketers to get that story right.
Mm-hmm. Rich, any perspectives from GLAD about data, the best data that you kind of use or look for?
I always think that the best data is what your competitors are doing, and not to get left behind. And I think the amicus brief is a great example. All of the companies who funded the marriage equality campaigns that we saw last November around the country, and now this latest uptick in LGBT images in mainstream advertising. Corporate America is on board with the LGBT community, and that's only going to continue and going to grow. And I don't think that there's any corporation out there who's going to want to be left behind or be late to the game, because what we've seen too is that if you are late to the game, it's a little harder to break through that clutter.
It is, and I think that's exactly the way I'd put it too, Rich, is we're beyond fear. Now we're into reward. The companies that are acknowledging that they have an opportunity have got to really wrap their heads around this and think about how they want to communicate this. It's the fact that we're going to be married across America. These are households that they can talk to. Why wouldn't you want to talk to married gay couples?
Exactly. Well, I want to take a couple minutes and let the folks on the call talk about their next plans and to do some action planning. I kind of asked at the beginning to have you thinking about what are your going to be next steps on marketing and what else do you need to know. And Bob and Rich are both available to kind of make some comments. So if you could, like in about 1 minute, and I'm going to start with Aaron again, talk about what it is that your next steps are. What comes from this class and what are you next doing? So Aaron, go ahead.
Sure. Well, my impetus for joining this ultimately was I work at a LGBT employee resource group within a group of different ad agencies. So our goal is to not only be a resource for agencies, but we're looking to kind of evolve it into a business stream for the agency as a whole, as a business service, as an ad agency, of where can we provide value to our clients and potentially provide a separate, maybe not separate, but integrated group for considering LGBT marketing, advertising, and planning across all of our clients. So I'm taking this learning into kind of my general knowledge overall, but into consideration for that.
I was part of Fleischman Hillard before joining GLAD, and we started an LGBT marketing practice while I was there. One of the ways we got things started was by starting an external blog, but it was mostly shared internally about the latest trends in LGBT marketing, what brands were doing it, and really kind of positioning some of our staff members. I was full-time corporate communications and financial, so this was strictly on my own time. But in starting to generate those blog posts and that level of expertise to then share with other clients. And again, the best way that we sold some of our clients in testing the waters and at this point it was many of their first times doing anything LGBT, was to let them know what their competitors were doing and what the broader landscape was, and that they weren't alone in doing it. And then going along on new business pitches and serving as kind of part of a multicultural practice is what generally happened. That was more of a PR and comms firm, though.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Chris, how about you? Go ahead.
So for me, my next step really is actually even a prequel to any kind of real marketing activity, and that's that our board of directors at the Maryland Corporate Counsel Organization needs to have a strategy session to determine exactly what order and when we want to target marketing to specific segments of the local LGBTA market, and specifically I'm referring to college students as one segment, young professionals that are just entering the workforce as another segment, and then more experienced folks that are in the workforce, and then also allies, just as a general group. So I don't know what order we're targeting all those folks in. We're also going to be doing a membership push into the military, law enforcement, and federal agency space because of where we're located. So that's another way of looking at the segments. And so My next steps really just depend on the outcome, some board strategy sessions on which groups we target first for membership and what we think the right kind of messaging is for them. And then after that, I have to try to search for images because we really don't have a repository that's available to us. I may have to make them myself.
Invention time. Sounds good, Chris. Nadim, how about you? Nadim, I think you might still be on mute. And they lost Nadine there. Okay, let's try Joe. How about you? Hang on a second, Joe. Let me unmute you. There we go, Joe. Try that.
Actually, specifically, I'm here to potentially help clients do this, so I don't have anything specific to tell you other than I'm potentially a resource for you.
Excellent. Sounds good. And Joe, what specific areas are you kind of really looking at? I mean, if you said, what's going to be my very next step?
We focus on primarily face-to-face marketing solutions, so everything from the festivals to creative street teams to retail programs, tying in with the PR and marketing communications that go on top of that as well.
Great. Sounds good. Laura, how about you? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm actually putting together a set of slides for our marketing group to talk about how the Pride Employee Network can help them marketing strategy. The one thing that I haven't been able to find, and perhaps this group has some ideas on how I can go about that, is finding what our competitors are doing. I've seen a lot of great ads from other industries, but not really from the oil and gas industry, and perhaps there aren't any out there. But that's something that I've been looking for, and I just can't find any information.
You're with Chevron?
Yes, I'm with Chevron.
Right. Well, the one thing I was going to say is my experience has been, by the way, you guys always seem to have such a really good reputation, certainly in the community. But I don't think there's consumer-based advertising. I would say that in terms of talent and recruitment, you guys have been out there, but I haven't seen your competitors there. They certainly don't seem to spend the invest in connecting with even B2B audiences in terms of talent and hiring. So I think actually you guys are the outlier now, which actually puts you in a pretty good space for the moment.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah. I think it happens to be true. I hope it is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And in the past, another place I've looked is just at some of the larger LGBT events like Out and Equal, HRC, and the GLAAD Awards to kind of look through their list of sponsors to see about competitors. But I would agree with Bob in this case.
Well, it sounds like
only this case.
The Amicus brief is going to be the best source right now of all the companies that are listed as of today. So. Sandy, let's go ahead and what's your next plan? Go ahead.
Well, for me personally, we've had some marketing programs that have been running for 3 or 4 years now, and really I just want to continue them. So continue the conversations internally to make sure that our programs continue and that we can continue to grow them. So that's my agenda.
Do you have any new programs or plans coming out?
Unfortunately, no. Just with budgets the way they are, nothing new. But we're always talking internally. So, next year is a new year, I guess.
Got it. And April, how about you, from our perspective? What are we going to bring back to Out and Equal?
Well, I think one of the things that I would love to look at, maybe with you and with our Director of Community Empowerment, is just different ways that we can support some of our organizations and sponsors who are looking to grow their visibility and showcase their commitment to diversity.
How we use like the summit and things. Great, sounds good. All right. Well, again, let me put the resources up here real quick. Again, you'll have the slides, so you have these available on the quick resources. Any closing comments? Let's do those real quick. Rich and Bob, any last thoughts as we finish the third session here?
Well, this 3 sessions, and thank you for allowing me to participate solidified my thought that Bob Whittick is the master when it comes to LGBT marketing.
Absolutely.
My publicist speaking.
And you know, something that we spoke about in the first session that I would encourage everyone to think about is Spirit Day, especially in an age where budgets are dwindling for marketing. It seems like a very easy and visible way for the company to participate with the LGBT community, and you can learn about that at glad.org/spiritday, or just send me an email too.
I couldn't agree more with that recommendation, because I'm amazed at the growth, particularly that campaign has taken on, and it really inspires people. I'm really blown away by how much it has inspired people. Let me just close with this notion. I've noticed with the amicus brief that was filed today, and I was proud that we were one of the signers, Without an Equal and 276 other employers. A couple people, Facebook is such a robust conversation, and one person had written how thrilled they were to go on their Apple computer and go to Facebook, and knowing that both brands had signed on in support of marriage equality. And I was thinking how much those conversations we have as gay people, or as consumers, as people, as citizens, have really focused on how much we connect with those brands that we love, that we really love, and the ones that do the simple things that aren't hard. It isn't simple to sign up on an amicus brief, because you have to wrap your head around what changes in public policy you want. So not every company is as nimble to do that. I get that. But when you do those things resonate so deeply. They are just such powerful signals of the change that's here, and also the marketing strategies that you have are part and parcel of what people say about your brand. And so to me, it's not so much the formal strategies that we always have to come up with the budgets that say, how do we write this ad, or how do we create a digital campaign that's going to do these things, when it's sometimes these smaller, larger expressions and symbols. One campaign that we had last year in the fall, you all remember, is when Oreo came out with the Rainbow Oreo. It only existed where? In virtual space. It doesn't exist on your shelves and in the grocery stores. But whoever manufactured that image earned many times their salary that year, because that was so viral and so powerful, just a symbol. It's an iconic cookie. It's an iconic household treat. There's nobody we've ever met who hasn't tasted an Oreo. All of a sudden, Oreo tells us that they love us. And it doesn't get any simpler and singularly successful than that. So it's rather amazing to me that even simple gestures like that have power that transcends the most sophistication that we could come up with today.
That's great. And Bob and Rich, I want to thank both of you for all of your insights, because it really does make a difference and gets people thinking what they need to do next. When we finish this call today, we'll stop the meeting and you'll have a short survey. But I want to thank all of you for joining us on Out and Equal University's Marketing for the LGBT Community. We invite you to join lots of our other events tomorrow, our monthly town call about creating a true rainbow in LGBT ERGs. And we've got programs coming up all year long. We hope to see a lot of you at the summit. We hope to get both Rich and Bob there to do more of these workshops and have these discussions. And if we can be of any assistance at all, or you need any links, or said, wait, what happened with that? I forgot what that quote was. Please let us know. We'll send you the links to this recording so you can review them. And let other folks know about Out and Equal. So it's good working with you, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks a lot.